Good afternoon. I'm Nat Malkus, and I'm pleased to welcome you in person and online to the American Enterprise Institute for today's conversation with Republican leader of the House Committee on Education and Labor, Virginia Foxx, on the Republican vision for higher education, federal higher education policy. Federal higher education policy has a long list of policy challenges that indeed need addressing. And many might view this issue area as one owned by the Democrats. That view may be helped by the president's willingness, announced just 3 weeks ago, if you can believe it, to move forward with a sweeping plan of student loan forgiveness that could end up being denominated in the trillions, and to do so without legislative action. In the wake of that announcement, many may be wondering what Republicans have to say on this issue area and whether they have a positive view for higher education policy or just more critiques of the current administration. Well, I have some good news. The Republicans have a lot to say. In fact, the week before Biden's announcement, House Republicans proposed the Responsible Education Assistance Through Loan Reforms Act, or the Real Reforms Act, as an alternative to broad student debt cancellation proposals. The Real Reforms Act contains a number of policies, including expanded Pell eligibility, capping borrowers' total repayments at the principal loan amount plus 10 years of interest, creating a new income-based repayment plan, and other provisions that would not only address the struggle that many Americans are facing under student loans and higher education finance, but also the root causes of these problems. Now, who better to come talk to you about these subjects than Virginia Foxx of North Carolina, who introduced the Real Reforms Act and is leading a charge to find practical and sustainable solutions to the problems facing American higher education. In just a minute, I will ask Representative Foxx to come up to the dais to deliver her remarks. And then my colleague, AEI Senior Fellow Beth Akers, will join Representative Foxx on the stage for a fireside chat about the way forward on higher education policy. For those of you watching online, later we will have a Q&A. If you have a question to offer up for Representative Foxx, you can submit that on Twitter using our hashtag, Foxx@AEI, that's FOXX@AEI, or you can email our very own Haley Sannon, whose email you'll find listed on the event page. Now I'll ask you all to welcome our guest, Representative Virginia Foxx.
Thank you very much, Nat. I thank you for having me here today. The work the American Enterprise Institute does in education space is invaluable. When this event was scheduled, I think many of us in this room were hopeful that the president would ignore the loudest voices of the radical wing of his party when it came to the fate of the federal student loan program. I don't think I need to spend much time telling you that reform to our post-secondary education system is more necessary now than it ever has been. We're at a pivotal moment. While I can assure you that my Republican colleagues and I will fight to the bitter end against this illegal, abusive use of the executive pen, the outcome of that fight remains to be seen. We cannot allow this to distract us from the hard work ahead of enacting the real, lasting change our students and families desperately need. Regardless of whether the president is successful in this attempt or if the rule of law prevails and he is stopped, our post-secondary education system is still broken. Everyone will still be asking the same question: where do we go from here? Democrats have been clear about their answer: abolish student lending and replacing it with a radical system of free college, free of any accountability. However, the president could not get this radical agenda through Congress, so now he's resorted to executive fiat to make damaging changes to the loan program. The president's agenda of free college isn't about students or improving our broken higher education system. It's a Trojan horse for handing Washington bureaucrats the control they desire. Over the last 2 years, we've seen an administration completely dismantle the federal student loan program. From unjustified extensions of the nearly 3-year pause of student loan payments to illegal waivers expanding programs intended to be limited safety net programs to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, to providing blanket cancellation to over 20 million borrowers, the president is spending $1 trillion to deliver free college for a select few. It is easy to become immune to the implications of $1 trillion in new spending when Democrats have all but forgotten their responsibility to practice good stewardship of taxpayer dollars. To put things in perspective, the Biden administration has spent 3 times as much forgiving loans for government bureaucrats and affluent students with expensive graduate degrees as Congress will allocate to assist low and middle income families through the Pell Grant over the next decade. This is not responsible policy, nor does it provide targeted relief for those harmed by the very programs Democrats themselves created. This dishonorable debt transfer demonstrates why so many of us believe the federal government should respect its constitutional role and leave education policy to parents and states. The government's incompetence in creating this mess is a clear example of the harms that come from abandoning federalism. It is necessary to tackle the problem before us, though, and abandon tilting at windmills. So House Republicans put in the work and offered a solution that fixes what's broken. House Republicans have an answer to that fundamental question: where do we go from here to address our broken post-secondary education system? Our answer begins with the Real Reforms Act. The legislation protects the interests of students and taxpayers. It's one that provides targeted relief for borrowers harmed today, accompanied by lasting reforms to ensure it never happens to the borrowers of tomorrow. Despite policy goals of income-driven repayment, this system has left millions of borrowers trapped under a mountain of interest. Many of these borrowers have done everything right, making their monthly payments and following through on their promise to taxpayers. Yet they find themselves years later making little to no progress on their principal, even after paying back far more than what was originally asked of them. The Republican bill not only ensures this unjust accumulation of interest will not happen for the millions of freshmen borrowing for their first semester this year, but it makes it right for those borrowers who have been wronged. Upon enactment of the Real Reforms Act, borrowers who have paid back more than what they owed will have their remaining balance discharged. Moreover, borrowers who have made payments for the last decade and still are unable to make a dent in their principal will be given a chance to do so by waiving their outstanding interest. The president ignored our common sense proposal and opted to take the partisan road and charge every American taxpayer approximately $3,000 to pay off the debt that someone else willingly took on. This shameful, sad, and blatantly political move is politics at its worst. It's unfair to the mother of 4 struggling to put food on the table who never set foot on a college campus. It's unfair to the borrowers who worked their way through college or those who had the grit to pay off their debts despite the challenges that life threw at them. It's unfair to the students of tomorrow who will be forced to take on more student loan debt to obtain increasingly expensive degrees with diminishing value. Simply put, it is a slap in the face to every hardworking taxpayer in this country, including every one of us in this room who's deeply concerned about the direction of post-secondary education and are willing to work across the aisle to fix it. But as I said earlier, we cannot lose sight of the task at hand. The American people deserve better, and there's an alternative vision for higher education that can deliver better results. This vision requires not only addressing the symptoms, but also the underlying disease. In addition to targeted relief, the Real Reforms Act simplifies student loan repayment, caps graduate lending while ensuring access, and eliminates runaway forgiveness programs. The cost of failing to address the structural issues in how we approach post-secondary education go beyond just dollars and cents. For far too long, we as a society have told our children that the path to success runs through a baccalaureate degree and only that. That was a grave mistake, and the predictable result is the drastically diminished return on investment in college for students and families we see today. We must change our mentality and recognize there are many paths to the American dream. The Real Reforms Act takes the first step towards doing just that. It opens up opportunities to the middle class beyond the traditional college model by expanding the Pell Grant to career-focused credentials offered at a fraction of the cost of that model. But the Real Reforms Act is just a down payment. Republicans recognize there's much more that needs to be done if we're going to restore the promise of post-secondary education. A broader answer to our broken system requires rolling up our sleeves and developing solutions for the uncomfortable challenges that policymakers have been unwilling to address to date. Chief among these is requiring schools to have a stake in their students' success. For too long, colleges have been more focused on getting students in the door and have paid little mind to what happens when they're in and when they leave. This is a problem of perverse incentives and one that can be corrected by requiring colleges to share the risk of the loans they originate with students and taxpayers. No longer can colleges receive a free pass when 4 in 10 of their students never graduate. Nor can they be shielded from the financial costs of providing overpriced degrees in fields they know will leave their students in a worse financial position than when they started. This is particularly true when it comes to graduate programs. How can an institution justify charging $100,000 for a master's in social work when a quick Google search shows that social work salaries are not likely to earn 6 figures? It's not surprising that research shows 40% of master's programs have a negative return on investment. The cost of non-repayment can no longer fall squarely on taxpayers. Schools must be on the hook for a share of the taxpayer losses proportionate to the riskiness of the programs they encourage prospective students to enroll in. Second, we must fix post-secondary education's opaque pricing system. In any well-functioning market, the price you see reflects the quality of the product being sold. Moreover, it's the actual price you will pay. Unsurprisingly, This is not the case in our poorly functioning post-secondary education market. The rise of strategic tuition discounting and merit aid has completely distorted the connection between price and quality. What was once an institutional scholarship has often turned into a calculated bid to attract students who otherwise would be unwilling to attend. Two identical students with the exact same academic and financial circumstances could have tuition bills for the same degree differing by $15,000 simply because one put an additional school on their FAFSA. The problem is present at all types of institutions, but can be found more often at institutions that are not receiving their budgets from state funding. The practice threatens their financial viability long-term, and these distortions exacerbate the problem of students finding a school that's a good fit, as sticker shock deters high-ability students from ever applying because they believe they simply can't afford it. The price of a degree should reflect its value. When a degree in general studies or English starts at $75,000, we cannot be surprised that the American public is skeptical about the motives of colleges and universities. Lastly, we must work with colleges and universities as partners in this effort. Punitive measures are not enough on their own, and they send a signal that Congress is more focused on settling scores than encouraging the outcomes every one of us hope to achieve. There are institutions who are unwilling or unable to do what's necessary to improve student outcomes, and they can and will be held accountable for it. But there are plenty of institutions who are doing the right thing and serving their students well, and they should be rewarded for that, but in a way that encourages them to continue providing high-quality programs that lead to successful economic opportunities for their graduates. Thank you very much for your time and for your own work examining the profound challenges facing higher education. We can find answers together that will address these challenges without empty bailouts and government overreach. I look forward to my discussion with Beth as well as your questions. Again, thank you very much.
Representative Foxx, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your leadership on this issue that's important to all of us and especially important to me. And it's an honor to be here and have a chance to chat with you. So thank you for
Beth,
joining
and thank you for giving us your time on the committee for hearings, and we appreciate that very much.
Of course, yes. Usually the roles are reversed. I'm in the hot seat, and today you're going to be in the hot seat, but I promise I won't be too hard on you.
I hope it's not too hot.
It's the warm seat
Warm
today.
seat, okay.
We'll call it the warm seat. Okay, so wonderful. You know, I'm a huge fan of all of the reforms that you've proposed. You know, we're of the same mind in thinking that those things are necessary. The air in the room on education discussion right now is just all about politics. Right? It's such a pleasure to hear you talk about policy, to hear about nuanced solutions that solve the real problems. But how do we move from a conversation and action from the White House that's dominated by political motive to real reform? Is this something that's going to be part of a future Higher Education Act reauthorization, or how do you surmount that obstacle?
Well, we all know that we're hoping very much for Republicans to be in the majority in the next session of Congress. And I can tell you we're prepared to work in a bipartisan fashion. We have done that in the past. The American people are going to demand it, Beth, I believe. To sort of distort a phrase that's common nowadays, I believe they have awakened to the problems that exist, not just in post-secondary education, but throughout education in the country. And they're unhappy with what they're seeing, and they want to see changes. And so I believe that they're going to demand that we make changes. They're going to vote with their feet. They already are, and I think they'll do more of that. We must change.
I agree. I hope that the silver lining of what's happened in the past 3 weeks is that we have an interest and a drive for real change, and I hope you can be a leader on that. I want to talk about what I think is a really important and even surprising piece of this proposed legislation, and that's the changes to interest. So, usually when we're talking about handing out money, we're looking at the Democrats. But when I look at what you've talked about today, you're eliminating interest accumulation after 10 years for new student loans and waiving accrued interest for existing student loans. This is handout of free money.
Not really. It's not at all.
So tell me why that's the case and why is this a priority?
It's really not at all. The programs that we've been talking about, and we won't go into the alphabet soup about the different programs, but the programs have been very, very poorly designed. And, the Democrats have looked at other people and blamed them for the programs, but they should only look in the mirror because they're the ones who designed the programs. But we think it's totally unfair to ask people to pay back more than they actually borrowed. And because of the way the programs are structured right now, that's what's happening. What we do with the Real Reforms Act is we institute a very simple loan program so that the students know exactly how much they're borrowing and how they're going to pay it back. And we don't charge them more than what they borrowed. And now what's happening is in some cases, they're on the hook for more than what they borrowed. And then if they don't pay it, the taxpayers wind up. But no, it's not a handout at all. It's actually streamlining the program. And we think it would work so much better than what exists now.
I was thrilled to see that because, as somebody who's often arguing against loan cancellation and handing out money in this space, I often hear from people who are really upset about their student loans. And the thing that is very often upsetting them is their interest. It's not that they have to pay back what they borrowed.
Right.
It's that the negative amortization on their loans has caused them to make insufficient payments, that their balances are increasing over time, and they are angry, and I don't blame them. And so this piece addresses that. So do you think that's a winning move from a political perspective?
Oh, I do. I think conservatives are fair people, and I think this is a very fair thing to do. What the Biden administration has done is turned education and the student loan programs on their head. And what they're doing right now is they're winding up paying off the loans of very wealthy people. That's not what we want. We want to be able to help low and moderate income people have access to education and, again, understand exactly what they're borrowing and exactly how much they're going to have to pay back.
That sounds fair to me. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the executive action canceling millions of borrowers' loans at a cost of $500 billion. The question everyone's asking me, which I can now ask you, which is, will it be stopped? How can it be stopped? What's going to come on that front?
Well, as I said in my remarks, Republicans are doing everything we can. Republicans on the committee are doing everything we can to bring this to the attention of the American people, to have them understand why it's so wrong for the Biden administration to be paying off hundreds of thousands of dollars for people who are very wealthy. We hope that there will be ways to stop it. We're looking for ways to stop it. We're open to suggestions for ways to stop it. Right now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we do believe there will be actions that will come forward that will be able to stop it. And we're working as hard as we can to find out what those are going to be.
Do you know what our timeline is on that? Something we need to move quickly on?
No, I can't tell you that.
That's okay. I'm not sure anyone can tell us, but I thought maybe you had the answer.
Right.
I had a reader find my website and send me an email the other day asking if they could join in on a class action lawsuit because they did pay back their student loans and they would like some money too.
There are a lot of people asking me the same question.
I was going to say, should I send those people your way?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfair, right? I mean,
Totally unfair.
yeah.
It's totally unfair. It's unfair to the people who worked their way through college, never borrowed money, parents who worked double jobs, all of those situations. It's unfair to all of those people. You know, it's only about 13% of the people in this country whose loans are being transferred to other people. And that's totally unfair.
Yeah. Okay, so let's back up to before things got crazy with this executive action from the White House. Doubling Pell was on the table. And this is an idea that is somewhat reasonable. I mean, we haven't had Pell increasing as quickly as inflation. And so at some point, we want to think about potentially expanding that. So you and I agree very deeply that college should deliver opportunity. College is more than that, but we believe at a baseline, college should deliver opportunity. So if we're talking about expanding the Pell Grant program or putting really more money into education in any way, what needs to come with that to make sure that we're not putting more dollars and checks to institutions that year after year are putting graduates into the world that are not able to repay their loans, that are not able to pay their own bills?
Well, let me back up just a little bit to what you said about inflationary pressures. We know that the more money that goes into assisting students, the higher are the costs of post-secondary education. So those two things go along together. So if we're going to have increased financial aid, we need increased accountability. And doubling Pell, I'm not sure, is the answer to what we need to be doing. We'd like to have workforce Pell, which helps us have students have an alternative to seeking a baccalaureate degree. And so we would like to see money go into workforce Pell and help students gain those skills, hopefully eventually work through becoming lifelong learners. But doubling Pell is not the answer, because all that does is allow the colleges and universities to increase the cost, and we're always going to be chasing the increased cost, and so that's not the way to go. But what we do want to do, again, is tie financial aid to accountability systems.
Great. Okay, so talking about expensive, the GAO released a report recently that revealed that over the past 20 years, the federal student loan program cost $311 billion more than the Department of Education had believed it did. How do we even process that, and what do lawmakers do with that information?
Well, again, we need accountability. Whether or not this was done intentionally or it was an accident, the American people have been lied to about what programs cost. We need a much better system for gaining information on what programs are going to cost. And so we have got to do something about that, and we plan to do something about that.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to workforce Pell, because I think that's a great idea. So some people in America are not looking to go sit on a college campus for 4 years and float down those lazy rivers that we always complain about, even though that's not totally a fair criticism, or climbing those climbing walls that are supposedly driving up the cost of education. They want, or they need, skills, and they want them quickly, right? And so workforce Pell is a solution. Talk a little bit more about that and why that's necessary.
Well, there are many people who, again, 70% of the people in this country don't have baccalaureate degrees. Let's start with that. So the majority of people don't have baccalaureate degrees, but they are lacking skills to fill the 11 million jobs that are out there right now. And so our idea is, why don't we come up with a mechanism for providing some short-term financial aid that will allow students or people to get skills that they need, become employed, and then continue their education while they're employed, which is done by millions of people in this country already.
Right.
But many of them need that start because they can't afford to stop work full-time, to go to school, or to get the short-term credentials. So more and more our country is looking to credentialing as opposed to degrees. And I think that is the way that we want to go. As I said, I want people to be lifelong learners. I want them to get into an education program that makes them feel positive about themselves. And then they say, wow, I've enjoyed this experience of learning. I want to keep learning, instead of what's happening to so many people now, where they feel defeated because they haven't been able to pass the courses, or they feel they're in over their head. Whatever happens to them, they drop out. 4 in 10 of them don't finish their degrees. Let's put people where their interests are, get them skills, let them go to work, and then continue learning, continue working while they're doing that.
And so what you have proposed, and I think the idea of workforce Pell rather than short-term Pell is something that you've coined, which I think is great because it's celebrating participation in the workforce, which I think is under-celebrated, and I believe you do too. So what you have specified is that these are funds that would become available for programs that were as short as 8 weeks and 150 hours for students. And so that's a big change from what we have, right?
Correct. Now you have to be enrolled in at least 12 hours at a community college or a baccalaureate institution, and basically going to school full time to get the grant. What the program, the 150 hours would be, or 8 weeks, you'd be enrolled in the program full time, but it would lead to a credential that would allow you to go to work immediately, and then you would be able to continue.
Right. And so what stands in our way of getting this passed? Because I know we've seen short-term Pell in other forms proposed previously and has failed multiple times. So what helps push this through, or how is this different from what we've seen in the past?
Well, again, I think we have plans. We talked about Real Reform Act. That's the first step for us in the reform of post-secondary education. We plan to have a vigorous higher ed bill next year that will include that in it. And we're going to be, again, pushing this in every way that we possibly can.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, more money. So we're always tying that to something, which is performance, right? Again, we want these programs to pay. That's what students want. Surveys tell us that over 90% of people, when they go to college, are looking for, well, they're looking for multiple things, but the number one thing that they're looking for, and you know this, is they're looking for a financial return.
Exactly.
So when you've got a program like this, Workforce Pell, giving out new money, new programs that weren't previously eligible for, how do you make sure that that's not just going to be floating off into the ether and not producing results for students?
We want Workforce Pell, as well as every other program in post-secondary education, to prove its worth. We want there to be high-quality programs that are accountable, and we will work that into our proposals as we go through proposing the HEA.
Okay, I think that's wonderful, and I'm excited about that. So I want to talk more about that last piece, because I knew that you were on board with these Workforce Pell programs having to prove their worth, and specifically, I know what you would like to see is that the income increase that they generate exceeds the price.
Correct.
Very sensible. When I talk to people who are non-experts or not politicians in this space, they're often surprised that that bar is not surpassed by all programs that are receiving federal aid dollars. But the idea of moving that to all institutions, that's huge. It's a huge game changer for higher education. What are the politics behind that?
Well, in the past, schools have not been able to prove that their degrees or their programs have moved people toward being able to make more money or improve their lives beyond what happened to them when they first came in. We believe that by requiring accountability, requiring transparency, publishing information about the outcomes of the programs at the program level, we want to go all the way down to the program level. And there are actually some states that are already doing that, and we think they are good role models for it. Texas in particular has started doing that. And we believe when that information is available to students and their parents, that they will vote with their feet. And they will say, okay, here's a program that's proven that it will work, that if I invest my money, there'll be a return on investment for people. In the past, it's been, you got to have a baccalaureate degree. Oh, if you get a baccalaureate degree, you make $1 million more than somebody with a high school degree.
Right.
It's a very general statement. It may be true, it may not be true, depending on what you major in, how much money it costs, all of those things. So what we want to do is get it down to the granular level where people will be able to say, okay, if I use the example of an English degree. Are you going to go out and spend $75,000 a year to get a degree in English, which is not likely? Now, I was an English major, so I can use English degree as an example, you know. Is it going to give you the return on investment that you'd like to have? And we believe, you know, AEI is all about freedom. We want people to make choices. But to make choices, they have to have accurate information. And I alluded to it in my comments, transparency and accurate information. But we want to drill down on that so people will be able to make those decisions.
Well, I wasn't an English major. I was a math major and an economics major. And so I love the idea that you're trying to compel people to vote with their feet, right? And we've made some strides in that. We have more information today than we've ever had before. But I wonder if it goes far enough. I mean, what do we do on the regulation side to keep institutions accountable? Or is this really up to individuals to police institutions with their choices?
Well, we're not compelling people to vote with their feet. You're giving them the opportunity. But on the institution side, you're right. What we do is we say to the institutions, you have to have skin in the game. So we're saying to them, if you entice students into programs and the return on investment is not what you have told the students it'll going to be, if they're, then you will have to pay some of the price of this. And again, I alluded to it in my comments. We want the institutions to be held accountable because it's ultimately, again, the taxpayers who are paying for this in addition to the parents and the students. And then the institutions are off the hook, basically. And we want to make sure that they have skin in the game.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that I get all the time, and it's fun now because usually I have to be the bad guy and answer this question, but I get to hear you be the bad guy and answer that question.
Are you kidding? I'm a bad guy all the time answering questions.
Okay, so whenever I say things like this, people come to me and say, yes, but Beth, education is not just about money. I wondered how you answer that question.
Oh, I believe that. I believe that I completely believe that education and degrees are not just about money. I think that we're blessed, number one, to live in this country. That's the first thing I always tell people. And we can choose what makes us happy in this country. The government is not telling us what jobs we're to take, what education we're to take. We have the freedom to do what it is we want. What I want available is for people to have informed consent. I want them to understand what is available to them and what will happen as a result of the actions that they take or what is likely to happen. But no, money is not the answer to happiness, and degrees are not the answer to happiness. But I think people have the choice, and what we want to do is maintain that for people in this country.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so, as I said, I'm hoping that the silver lining of this executive action from the White House, was it 3 weeks ago now, is that we will bring people to the table. I wonder if you think that's going to happen. And I know you've been a leader in this space for a long time, but we often don't think of Republicans as being the leaders on this issue. What do you think is going to change in the way that Congress is dealing with higher education in the years to come?
Well, as I said, I think the American people now have awakened to what's happening in education at all levels. And I think they're going to make more demands on their representatives and senators than they have in the past. They see what's happened with the president's action as being totally unfair. They are unfair to the taxpayers. We're paying for loans that other people willingly took out. The institutions who are in many cases responsible for these large loans are getting away without any penalty. And so I do think there's going to be a sea change in what happens. And I'd like very much to be the leader in seeing that happen. It cannot continue. We're also seeing, again, this rise in credentialing, where people are saying, no, I don't need to take out $100,000 in debt or even $50,000 in debt to get the credentials that I need. And so I do see a big change occurring in our culture. I think there'll always be some interest in what we think of as a, quote, traditional college education, where 18-year-olds go off and live on campus and do those kinds of things. But I think more and more people are seeing this is not the path to wealth or to happiness or to a successful life. And I'm looking for an alternative to that. I mean, I think people are saying that.
Yeah.
I see alternatives to that.
Yeah.
And I think as those spread, and they are spreading, and they're spreading pretty quickly, again, with the electronics age that we have, with what happened with COVID, as people learn to work from home, as people learn to use their machines to gain credentials, to improve their lives, I think it's going to happen. I really do.
I'm hopeful. Okay, we can have a few minutes now where we can turn to the audience for some questions.
Good, no questions.
No
We can go home.
questions.
We just go home.
Well, that just means I get to ask more questions, so you don't get off the hook. There's a question right here in the front. Is someone able to come front with a microphone?
Hi, this is Marina from the Epoch Times. I was just curious,
Can you speak up just a little bit?
I was just curious, where did you get the information about the $3,000 that the taxpayer has to pay for the student debt? We are curious, where can we get those data?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty understanding. The $3,000 that taxpayers are going to pay, I heard that.
Yes, where can we get this data?
Where can we get the data for that? I'm not quite sure which source that came from. Some think tank. I don't know if it was AEI.
I think it was. I wish I could say that was done by me, but actually, I believe that was an analysis from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget,
okay.
who has been doing great work in this space.
Okay.
Or at least they have cited it extensively. I hope I'm not inappropriately giving them credit.
Right.
Oh, question over here.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Foxx. I have a question about graduate student debt, and many people that will receive loan forgiveness went to expensive graduate schools. It's not uncommon for these tuition costs to be in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. My question is, what would you like to do to bring those costs down? A lot of graduate programs cost a lot, and how would either your Real Reforms Act or future reforms address those underlying cost increases?
Well, I think that if we do not increase the amount of money that's out there, that in itself will help bring down the cost. Because I think part of what, as I said before, part of what has driven up the cost of a college education has been that the government has increased the amount of money that's gone into it. So there's been absolutely no incentive to hold down the cost of education. I think the other thing that might be done is that we look for ways to reward institutions that live within their means and within students' means, so that we give a reward. So you have, and you let those people know they're offering high quality programs for a cost that's less than other people are doing it. And so there's a way to give some reward to those people. So we have a carrot and maybe a stick, but we know carrots work better, right?
Thank you. I am wondering if I can ask a question a little off topic of financing of taxpayers, and if we could expect to see strong enforcement of Section 117 of the Higher Education Act in a Republican-controlled Congress, the requirement that gifts from foreign countries to universities be reported in a meaningful way. And if we don't want to talk about that, I wonder if you've considered the situation that we find ourselves in now with families, parents that have student loan debt, and now their college-age children are considering going to college and taking on more debt and aren't likely to do so. Have you considered any special remedies for families in that situation so that we can encourage family formation and learning in that?
Well, let's deal with the foreign gifts. We definitely want very, very strong laws and strong reporting mechanisms for foreign gifts. And for too long, universities have gotten by without reporting those foreign gifts or reporting them accurately. And we definitely want that to happen. We want to make very, very sure that we know what kind of foreign influences are coming in to the colleges and universities, and that there needs to be greater transparency in that area. As far as what to do about people who still have, I believe your question is, what do you do with people who still have college debt, whose children now are going to college and about to take on debt? For heaven's sakes, I hope those parents learn something and don't do the same thing. But with real reforms, that won't happen.
Dr. Foxx, over here. Hi, it's Emmanuel Guillory with the National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. Had a quick question for you. You had mentioned earlier that the Real Reform Act will likely be an HA reauthorization. I was wondering what would be your speculation of actually getting an HA reauthorization through Congress next session?
Well, I like to think of myself as the little engine that could. I am going to do everything that I can. You know the staff very well. You know the committee very well. And you know that we've been working very hard on trying to put together a bill already. We have a great committee right now, members of the committee, very, very strong. They're very dedicated to wanting to do something. And I think the majority of the members of Congress are going to be here next year are going to want to do something too. So I'm very positive about it. I think in this business you have to be positive, or else, again, all these folks who work on the committee and all the members who plug away at it would just give up. But I'm an optimist, and I think the time is right. You were with the committee before, and you know timing is everything sometimes with legislation, and I just happen to think the time is right. I do. I think we have a chance for real reform. In many ways, this is the most exciting time to be in education, and I've said that often in education, and I think it's the most exciting time we've had for reform, a true reform in education, not just in post-secondary education, but in elementary and secondary education too. I think we've got a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to helping move some of that along.
Well, that's an optimistic note, and I think a nice note for us to finish the conversation on today. Thank you for your leadership on this issue, and thank you for being here, allowing us to pick your brain and sharing your plans for the future with us.
Well, I want to thank you all for having me here, and to say to you all and to others that we have a lot of people in Congress who want to work on this issue. There's a lot of interest in it. We have a great staff that's been working on this too, and I want to give them kudos for the work that they do on it. They're the unsung heroes here, but we are going to keep pushing, and again, thank you, Beth, for having us here and allowing us to talk a little bit about this, and look forward to getting feedback.
Great. Okay, and thank you all for being here. I am going to ask one more thing of you, which is that you remain in your seats for just a few moments as we leave the room, but please join me in thanking Representative Foxx for being with us today.